A man dies in a hotel room in Cairo, fevered and gasping, with a single infected mosquito bite on his cheek and the weight of a pharaoh on his name. But the story begins decades earlier, in a church in Westminster, where a young woman walks down the aisle carrying a fortune that is not supposed to exist. Her husband is an earl with a famous house and dangerous debts. Her father is a banker, officially a family friend, unofficially something more. Highclere Castle does not survive on tradition. It survives on a secret transaction, and every locked door inside it has a price. The bride who paid the bill. In June of 1895, a 19-year-old bride brings more than love to the altar. She brings rescue money. The wedding takes place at St. Margaret's, Westminster. The church gleams with flowers. Yes, the guest list reads like a census of power. Almina Victoria Maria Alexandra Womwell stands in white silk and Belgian lace, her veil pinned with diamonds that catch the light through stained glass windows. She is marrying George Edward Stanhope Molyneux, Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He is 30 years old, good-looking in that particular way aristocrats are good-looking, which is to say expensive rather than remarkable. His family owns Highclere Castle in Hampshire, 15,000 acres of parkland, and a title that stretches back through centuries of English history. It should be romantic. It is arithmetic. The marriage settlement is discussed in whispers. Alfred de Rothschild, banker and collector, signs documents that make certain promises visible on paper. £500,000, £12,000 per year as an annuity. The Earl's existing debts cleared. These are not wedding gifts. They are terms. The numbers appear in legal language designed to look generous while functioning as rescue. The settlement is structured to suggest affection from a family friend, but everyone in the room understands what is being purchased. Access, legitimacy, a countess for a girl whose birth certificate raises questions no one will answer directly. Almina smiles for the photographers. She has been trained for this moment. Her education included French, piano, and the particular kind of silence that protects a fortune. She knows how to hold a teacup. She knows when not to ask why her legal father, Frederick Womwell, has so little money while Alfred de Rothschild pays for everything. She has learned that some facts remain true even when they are never spoken aloud. The marriage makes her a countess, but the bargain makes her something else. Collateral in a transaction between men who need each other more than they need to explain themselves. The ceremony ends. Rice falls like expensive snow. Carnarvon takes her hand. The contracts are signed. Highclere is saved, at least for now. The question that no one asks out loud is simple and brutal. If love is real, why does it read like a contract? The couple leaves for their honeymoon. Behind them, bankers and solicitors begin moving money across accounts, restructuring debt, ensuring that a castle stays standing, because a 19-year-old girl walked toward it wearing diamonds she did not inherit. Highclere looked grand. It was not. The castle's stone looks eternal. But inside, bills stack up faster than family portraits can hide them. Highclere rises from Hampshire parkland like a promise made in better times. The design is Jacobean revival, which means it looks medieval, but was actually built in the 1840s by Charles Barry, the same architect who designed the Houses of Parliament. Towers and turrets, Gothic windows, carved stone that suggests centuries of unbroken power. From a distance, it works. Up close, it costs. The estate runs on systems designed for an economy that no longer exists. There are stables that require grooms, gardens that require staff. Rooms that require heating even when no one enters them for months. The fifth Earl inherits a machine built to display wealth, not generated. His income comes from agricultural rents, which means it depends on grain prices, weather, and tenants who increasingly move to cities where factories pay better than fields. The math does not work. It has not worked for years. By the time Carnarvon marries Almina, Highclere is what wealthy families call embarrassed. The debts are not catastrophic yet, but they are structural. Maintenance costs rise. Income stays flat. The previous Earl tried to ignore the problem, which is the traditional aristocratic solution. It does not solve anything. It simply delays the moment when someone has to choose between selling land or selling furniture or selling the idea that everything is fine. Carnarvon does not want to be the Earl who loses Highclere. That is the nightmare that keeps him awake in rooms his ancestors paid for in cash. The estate is not just property. It is proof of relevance. Without it, he is a man with a title and nothing to show for it. The Victorian aristocracy is full of those men. They marry American heiresses, or open their homes to paying tourists, or quietly sell off paintings and pretend the walls always looked that bare. The Rothschild money changes everything, not because it makes the problems disappear, but because it makes them manageable. Debts are cleared. Credit is restored. The estate can breathe again, at least for a decade or two. But the bargain comes with an unspoken clause. Highclere must look untouched. The money must be invisible. No one can know that the castle survives because a banker's fortune is holding up the foundation. So, Carnarvon plays the role. He hosts shooting parties. He maintains the gardens. He smiles at tenants and acts like rent collection is a formality, not survival. Almina learns her part too. She becomes the countess who makes Highclere glamorous again, who fills the rooms with the right people, who makes the transaction look like a love story. The house stands. The bills are paid. The secret holds. But every guest who admires the ballroom, every neighbor who compliments the grounds, every portrait that hangs in the gallery, they all exist because a 19-year-old bride carried a checkbook down the aisle and called it a dowry. A secret father, a public crown. The Prince of Wales arrives for a glittering visit, and Almina learns that hospitality can be a weapon. The visit is announced weeks in advance. Edward, Prince of Wales, will spend a weekend at Highclere. This is not a favor. It is a test. The future king does not visit minor estates owned by embarrassed earls unless something has changed. And what has changed is Almina. She is young, she is wealthy, and she is connected to Alfred de Rothschild, who happens to be one of the prince's closest friends. The invitation is accepted. The machinery of preparation begins. Highclere transforms. Staff are hired. Menus are planned. Rooms are prepared with the kind of attention usually reserved for state visits. Almina oversees every detail. The linens must be perfect. The flowers must be exotic, but not excessive. The wine must be French, and the conversation must be effortless. She is 19 years old, and she is orchestrating a performance designed to convince the future king that she belongs in the world she has purchased entry to. The weekend succeeds. Edward is charming. He admires the house. He compliments the shooting. And he treats Almina with the particular warmth he reserves for women who make his life easier, which is to say women who are beautiful, rich, and willing to host him without asking for anything inconvenient in return. Carnarvon watches his wife manage royalty and understands that the marriage has bought him more than financial solvency. It has bought him access. But the visit, also sharpens a question that polite society pretends not to ask. Who is Almina, really? Her legal father is Frederick Wombwell, a minor figure with no fortune of his own. Her mother is Marie Wombwell, formerly Marie Boyer, the daughter of a French captain. They live in a house provided by Alfred de Rothschild. They travel on money provided by Alfred de Rothschild. Almina's entire childhood was funded, furnished, and orchestrated by a man who is officially just a friend of the family. The explanation offered is that Alfred has no legitimate children of his own and chose to lavish affection on the Wombwells out of generosity. The explanation people believe is simpler and more uncomfortable. Almina is his daughter. The settlement is not a gift. It is inheritance disguised as wedding present, structured to avoid scandal while ensuring that his child is provided for. The rumors are specific enough to be repeated and vague enough to be denied. Almina never confirms it. She never denies it. She learns to exist in the space where certainty cannot reach, where her legitimacy is always slightly in question, but never quite disprovable. She is a countess, which means she has a title. But she is also the subject of whispers, which means she will spend the rest of her life proving that the title fits. The Prince of Wales leaves Highclere satisfied. The weekend is judged a success. Almina has passed the test. She has shown that she can turn money into influence, wealth into acceptance, a secret transaction into a public triumph. The house is saved. The marriage is validated. The bargain, for now, looks like it worked. But late at night, in rooms that cost a fortune to heat, the question remains. If her father is a secret, and her fortune is a scandal, and her marriage is a contract, then what exactly has she won? The dowry that bought silence. The fortune keeps Highclere standing, and it also sets the rules for what can never be said out loud. Money is power, but only if it remains invisible. That is the lesson Almina learns in the first years of her marriage. The Rothschild fortune flows into Highclere in carefully structured payments. The £12,000 annual annuity arrives like clockwork. Additional funds appear when needed, documented as loans or gifts or investments that somehow never require repayment. On paper, Carnarvon is managing his estate. In practice, Almina's wealth is the only thing keeping the enterprise solvent. The settlement is designed to preserve appearances. The £500,000 is not handed over in a lump sum. It is held in trust, administered through solicitors, released in ways that can be explained without admitting dependency. Carnarvon's debts are cleared quietly. Mortgages are paid off. Lines of credit are restored. The transactions are structured to look like the Earl is finally managing his affairs properly. Not that his wife's fortune is doing the work his estates cannot. Inside the marriage, the arrangement creates a subtle inversion of power. Carnarvon has the title. Almina has the money. He controls what happens in public. She controls what happens in private. He decides which guests to invite. She decides whether they can afford to host them. The dynamic is never discussed directly, but it shapes every decision. She learns to present suggestions as wifely deference while quietly determining which renovations happen, which staff are hired, which expenses are sustainable. The cost is silence. Almina cannot complain about being the financial engine of the earldom because admitting it would destroy the illusion. She cannot acknowledge her father because doing so would confirm the scandal. And she cannot express frustration with the bargain because the bargain is what gave her the title in the first place. So she performs gratitude. She smiles at estate dinners. She thanks her husband for the privilege of being his countess. She never mentions that without her money, there would be no estate dinners to attend. The numbers tell the story her words cannot. The settlement covers approximately £500,000, in today's equivalent of tens of millions. The annuity of £12,000 per year translates to enough to run a significant household indefinitely. The debts cleared likely amounted to another £100,000 or more, accumulated over years of optimistic spending and deferred maintenance. Together, the figures represent not just wealth, but rescue. Yet Carnarvon was not exaggerating when he needed Almina. He was drowning. Highclere begins to stabilize. The estate runs smoothly. The staff are paid on time. The gardens are maintained. Shooting parties return to the calendar. The house looks like it always looked, which is the entire point. No one outside the family knows how close it came to collapse. No one sees the legal documents that outline the terms. No one calculates that the Countess is not just decorative, she is load-bearing. But Almina knows, and knowing changes her. She is not naive. She understands what she bought and what she sold. The marriage gave her status, protection, a place in a world that would have excluded her otherwise. It also gave her a life built on a secret she must keep even from herself. Because if she admits that the love story is a transaction, then she has to face what that makes her. Not a wife, not a countess, just a daughter paying her father's debts with the only currency she has left. Obedience to the story everyone needs to believe, when war turned the castle into wards. In the Great War, the grand rooms become places of pain, and Almina becomes useful in a way titles never prepared her for. The war begins in August of 1914. By September, Almina has turned Highclere into a hospital. It is not a symbolic gesture. It is a transformation. The drawing rooms where she hosted royalty now hold hospital beds. The dining hall where she served 12-course meals now serves as a recovery ward. The library, the ballroom, the bedrooms, all converted. 50 beds initially, eventually more. She funds the operation herself, pulling from the annuity and whatever additional money Alfred de Rothschild makes available. The costs are staggering. Medical equipment, nursing staff, doctors, supplies, food for patients who arrive shattered and leave, if they leave, slowly mending. Almina does not just write checks. She works. She learns to change dressings. She assists in surgeries. She sits with men who are dying and writes letters to their mothers. This is not what Edwardian countesses do. They might patron charities. They might appear at fundraisers. They do not scrub blood from floors or hold basins while surgeons extract shrapnel. But Almina is not interested in symbolic labor. She wants to be necessary. The transformation is radical. The woman who spent years learning to pour tea correctly is now learning to manage infection. The hands that wore gloves to avoid sunlight are now bare and raw from disinfectant. The voice trained for polite conversation is now firm and precise, giving orders to nurses, questioning doctors, advocating for soldiers who have no one else to speak for them. She discovers she is good at this, not performatively good, actually competent. The hospital operates throughout the war. Thousands of soldiers pass through Highclere. Some recover, some do not. Almina keeps meticulous records, patient names, injuries, treatments, outcomes. She runs the hospital the way an administrator runs an institution, with attention to detail and ruthless efficiency. The costs are documented in letters and ledgers. Medical supplies alone run into thousands of pounds per month. Staffing costs are equally high. Nurses must be paid. Doctors must be hired. The estate still requires maintenance, even as it serves as a medical facility. The financial burden is immense, but Almina does not hesitate. This is what the money is for. Not decoration, not status. Use. The contrast is brutal. Chandeliers hang above men missing limbs. Marble floors are scrubbed of blood. Rooms designed for beauty now smell of carbolic and suffering. The house that was saved by a secret transaction is now saving lives through visible, exhausting work. Almina is no longer the mysterious heiress. She is the countess who runs a hospital, who fights with military bureaucracy to get supplies, who refuses to accept that men should die because the system is slow or indifferent. But the work also isolates her. Carnarvon is rarely at Highclere during the war. He has duties elsewhere, official positions that keep him in London or traveling. The marriage, already a contract, becomes a formality. They exchange letters. They see each other occasionally. They remain polite. But the intimacy, if it ever existed, dissolves under the weight of separate lives. Almina is too busy to notice or too tired to care. The hospital consumes her. The soldiers need her. The house, for once, is not a performance space. It is a place where work happens. By the time the war ends, Almina has transformed herself. She is no longer the girl who walked down the aisle carrying rescue money. She is a woman who discovered that competence is more powerful than beauty, that purpose is more satisfying than status, that being useful is a kind of freedom, even when everything else is still a cage. But the cage is still there. The money is still a secret. The marriage is still a contract. And when the soldiers leave, and the beds are removed, and the ballroom is returned to its original function, Almina is left with a question she cannot answer. If she could transform Highclere once, what does it mean to transform it again, back into the fiction everyone prefers? Egypt offered him a new name. The Earl escapes Hampshire for sand and antiquity, chasing a discovery that might outlive his creditors and his body. Carnarvon does not love Highclere the way Almina does. For him, the estate is obligation. It is the thing he is supposed to care about because men in his position always care about their estates. But what he actually loves is elsewhere, Egypt, heat. The idea that somewhere in the sand is proof that his life means something beyond debt management and social performance. He starts going to Egypt in the early 1900s, initially for his health. A car accident in 1901 leaves him weak, prone to infections, struggling with English winters. Doctors recommend warm, dry climates. Egypt becomes his escape. But escape turns into obsession. He meets Howard Carter in 1907. Carter is an archaeologist and artist, prickly, brilliant, chronically underfunded. Carnarvon is a wealthy amateur with enthusiasm and checkbooks. The partnership is practical. Carter has expertise. Carnarvon has money. Together, they begin excavating in the Valley of the Kings, searching for what everyone assumes is already gone. Tomb robbers have been looting the valley for millennia. Most Egyptologists believe the site is exhausted. Carter disagrees. Somewhere, he insists, there is an intact tomb. Somewhere is a pharaoh who was buried and forgotten and never found. The work is slow, expensive, tedious. They dig for years and find fragments, pottery, scraps, nothing that justifies the cost. Carnarvon's money flows into the Egyptian sand season after season. The excavation becomes a joke among other archaeologists. The English Earl playing Indiana Jones with Rothschild money, chasing a fantasy. But Carnarvon does not care about the jokes. He cares about the search. Egypt gives him something Highclere never did: the possibility of being remembered for something other than marriage, or debt, or title. The possibility of a name that outlives the earldom. The costs are staggering. Excavation permits require bribes to officials. Labor requires hiring hundreds of Egyptian workers at daily wages. Tools, supplies, transport, security, all of it adds up. A single season can cost thousands of pounds. Carnarvon funds it through Almina's money, the annuity, the trust. The fortune that was supposed to save Highclere is now being spent in a desert 6,000 miles away, searching for a boy king who has been dead for 3,000 years. Almina does not object. She understands obsession. She also understands that the marriage is not about shared dreams. It is about parallel survivals. He needs Egypt. She needs Highclere. The money makes both possible. By 1922, Carnarvon is ready to quit. 15 years of digging. 15 years of expense. Almost nothing to show for it. Carter convinces him to fund one more season. Just one. Carnarvon agrees, more from loyalty to Carter than belief in success. The dig resumes in November. On November 4th, a workman uncovers a stone step, then another, then a staircase descending into bedrock. On November 26th, Carnarvon and Carter break through a sealed doorway and peer into darkness. Carter holds up a candle. Carnarvon asks if he can see anything. Carter replies with words that will be repeated for the next century. Yes, wonderful things. The tomb of Tutankhamun, intact, untouched, the greatest archaeological discovery of the modern era. The name Carnarvon has been chasing for 15 years is suddenly his. Newspapers around the world print his photograph. He is no longer the Earl who married money. He is the Earl who found the pharaoh. The obsession paid off. The fantasy became real. Egypt gave him what Highclere never could: immortality. But immortality has a price, and in the sand, in the heat, in the valley where kings sleep, something is already waiting for him. A mosquito, a bite, a fever, the beginning of the end dressed up as triumph. The world wanted a curse story. Newspapers did not want logistics, they wanted punishment, and they found it in a single sick man. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb is global news. Journalists descend on the Valley of the Kings. Photographers crowd around the entrance. The Times of London has exclusive rights to the story, which infuriates every other newspaper in the world. They are locked out of the greatest archaeological find in modern history, forced to rely on second-hand reports and official statements. So they start looking for other angles, and when Carnarvon gets sick, they find one. The timeline is simple and medical. In March of 1923, a mosquito bites Carnarvon on the cheek. The bite becomes infected, likely after he cuts it while shaving. The infection spreads. He develops a fever. His chronic health problems, the result of the car accident decades earlier, make him vulnerable. Pneumonia sets in. He is moved to the Continental Savoy Hotel in Cairo. Doctors try everything available in 1923, which is not much. Antibiotics do not exist yet. He declines rapidly. On April 5, 1923, at 1:50 a.m., he dies in the hotel room. His son is at his bedside. The cause of death is officially blood poisoning and pneumonia, the result of an infected insect bite. But newspapers do not want medical explanations. They want drama. They want mystery. They want punishment for disturbing the dead. The curse story begins almost immediately. The idea is simple and irresistible. Carnarvon opened a tomb that had been sealed for over 3,000 years. He disturbed a pharaoh's rest, and now, mere months later, he is dead. Coincidence or consequence? The narrative gains power because it fits a pattern people want to believe. Colonial powers have been looting Egypt for centuries, taking treasures and mummies and treating ancient graves like shopping opportunities. The curse story offers poetic justice. The colonizer is punished. The pharaoh has the last word. Death is not random. It is revenge. Newspapers run headlines about the mummy's curse. They interview spiritualists who claim to have predicted disaster. They publish lists of everyone connected to the tomb, tracking who lives and who dies, turning archaeology into a body count. The curse gains details as it spreads. Some accounts claim that when the tomb was opened, there was an inscription warning that death would come on swift wings to anyone who disturbed the king's rest. This inscription does not exist. No such text was found. But the story is too good to let facts interfere. Other accounts add atmosphere. They describe strange occurrences at the dig site, animals dying, workers reporting nightmares, a sense of dread hanging over the valley. None of this is documented in Carter's meticulous notes, but it becomes part of the legend anyway. The most famous detail arrives later. The claim that at the exact moment Carnarvon died in Cairo, the lights went out across the entire city. And back in England, at Highclere, his dog Susie supposedly howled and collapsed. These stories are repeated endlessly. They appear in books about the curse. They are cited as proof, but they are also stories, not facts. Cairo experienced frequent power failures due to an unreliable electrical grid. The blackout may have happened, but it was not unusual. The dog story is even flimsier. It is reported years later, usually without direct sourcing, and survives primarily because it is emotionally satisfying. The truth is simpler and sadder. Carnarvon was a man with chronic health issues who traveled to a country with limited medical infrastructure and contracted an infection that killed him before modern medicine existed to treat it. He died because mosquitoes carry bacteria, and because shaving with a blade can introduce infection, and because pneumonia was often fatal in 1923. There is no mystery. There is only bad luck and bad timing. But the world does not want bad luck. It wants meaning. It wants to believe that desecration has consequences. The curse story survives because it transforms a random death into moral theater. Carnarvon becomes not a victim of illness, but a symbol of hubris, punished. The story is not about him anymore. It is about what people need to believe about power, greed, and the limits of human ambition. The pharaoh gets the last word, even if the pharaoh never said it. The lights went out, or did they? One story says Cairo went dark at the exact moment he died, and back in England, his dog collapsed. The legend grows in the telling. The blackout becomes fixed in the narrative. Witnesses swear they remember it. Accounts describe the city plunging into darkness just as Carnarvon breathes his last. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. It must be the curse. It must be the pharaoh, reaching across millennia to extinguish the light of the man who violated his tomb. The story is repeated in newspapers, books, documentaries. It becomes one of the most famous details of the curse mythology. But Cairo, in 1923, had an unreliable electrical system. Power failures were common. The city's infrastructure was aging and inconsistent. Outages happened regularly, sometimes multiple times per week. No one thought to record routine blackouts because they were routine. The idea that one specific outage coincided with one specific death is impossible to verify. No contemporary news reports mention it. Carter's diaries do not reference it. The story appears later, after the curse narrative has already taken hold, when people are looking for confirmation and memory becomes unreliable. The dog story is even more suspect. Susie was reportedly a wire-haired fox terrier. The claim is that she howled at Highclere at the exact moment Carnarvon died in Cairo, then collapsed and died herself. The story is emotionally powerful. It suggests a supernatural connection between master and animal, a bond so strong it transcends distance and death. But the sourcing is vague. Some versions say a servant witnessed it. Others claim it was reported in letters. The story does not appear in reliable contemporary accounts, though it emerges later as the curse legend becomes profitable, as Highclere itself begins to market the mystery. The timing is impossible to verify. Carnarvon died at 1:50 a.m. Cairo time. That would be 11:50 p.m. in England. Who was awake at Highclere to witness the dog's alleged collapse? Who recorded the exact time? How was the information transmitted back to Cairo to confirm the synchronicity? These questions are never answered because the story is not about evidence. It is about narrative satisfaction. A loyal dog dying at the same moment as its master is the kind of detail that makes a legend feel complete. The distance matters too. Cairo is approximately 2,300 miles from Highclere. The idea that a supernatural event could manifest simultaneously in both locations is part of the appeal. It suggests the curse is not bound by geography or physical limits. It can reach anywhere. It can strike anyone. The randomness of death becomes coordinated vengeance. The chaos becomes control. But chaos is usually just chaos. Dogs die. They die of old age, illness, accident, all the ordinary tragedies that affect animals. If Susie did die around the time Carnarvon died, it would be sad and coincidental, not supernatural. And if she did not die, if the story was invented or misremembered or exaggerated, then it is simply one more piece of mythology layered onto a death that needed no embellishment. The legend persists because people want to believe it. The blackout and the dog are better than the truth, which is that a man got sick and died far from home while his family waited for news. The legend gives shape to grief. It transforms loss into narrative. It allows people to feel that death, random and unfair, might actually mean something if we just squint hard enough at the timing. But meaning and coincidence are not the same thing. And the more you examine the curse stories, the more they dissolve into rumor, repetition, and the very human need to believe that the universe is watching and keeping score. Cairo had blackouts. Dogs die. Men get sick. Sometimes it all happens at once, and sometimes we call it a curse because the alternative is admitting that tragedy is just bad luck wearing a better story. The widow who could not leave. Almina brings his body home, but she cannot bring home the man she thought she married. Carnarvon dies in Cairo. Almina is not with him. She is at Highclere, managing the estate, and maintaining the fiction that everything is normal even as her husband lies dying 6,000 miles away. The news reaches her by telegram. Terse, final. The Earl is dead. She must decide what happens next. She brings the body home. It is transported from Egypt to England, a journey that takes weeks and requires coordination, paperwork, and money. The funeral is held at Highclere. The estate fills with mourners. The press covers the event. The Earl who found the pharaoh is buried with full honors, and the widow stands in black and receives condolences from people who knew him and people who only knew his fame. She is 47 years old. She has been married for 28 years, and she is now alone with a house, a title, and a story she did not choose. The grief is complicated. She loved him, probably. She resented him, certainly. He was never fully present in their marriage. His obsessions took him elsewhere, to Egypt, to escape, to the idea that he could be something other than the Earl who married money. She gave him that freedom. Her fortune funded his dreams. Her money kept Highclere standing while he chased immortality in the sand. She did not complain. She played her role. She was the competent countess, the woman who ran the hospital, the wife who asked for nothing and got less. But now he is gone, and the story belongs to the world, not to her. The curse narrative explodes after his death. Every newspaper in Europe prints speculation. Was it the mummy? Was it divine punishment? Was it proof that some boundaries should not be crossed? Almina cannot escape it. Visitors come to Highclere expecting to hear ghost stories. Journalists ask her about the curse. Spiritualists write letters claiming they predicted the death. She is trapped between truth and legend, between the medical facts and the version people prefer to believe. She remarries in 1923, less than a year after Carnarvon's death. The new husband is Colonel Ian Onslow Dennistoun, a man with his own financial troubles and his own need for rescue. The marriage is brief and disastrous. He spends her money. She discovers too late that he is not what he presented himself to be. The divorce is ugly and public. She loses a significant portion of her remaining fortune in the settlement. The second bargain fails worse than the first. By the 1930s, Almina is no longer wealthy. The annuity ran out. Alfred de Rothschild died in 1918, and without his protection, the money dried up. She sells jewelry. She rents out parts of Highclere. She takes a job as a nurse, returning to the work that gave her purpose during the war. The Countess becomes ordinary. The woman who once hosted royalty now works for wages. The transformation is complete, but it is not triumphant. It is survival stripped of dignity. She spends her later years in modest circumstances, far from Highclere, far from the world that once revolved around her fortune. She writes her memoirs, trying to control the narrative, trying to explain what it was like to be the woman behind the Earl, the money behind the castle, the heiress who bought a title and learned that purchase and possession are not the same thing. The book does not sell well. People want the curse. They want the pharaoh. They want drama, not the quiet accounting of a woman who gave everything to a house that never thanked her. She dies in 1969 at the age of 93. The obituaries mention Carnarvon. They mention Tutankhamun. They mention the curse. They do not mention that she saved Highclere. They do not mention the hospital. They do not mention the years she spent working after the money ran out. She is remembered when she is remembered, as the wife of the man who found the tomb. Not as the woman who funded the search, not as the nurse who saved soldiers, not as the daughter who lived her entire life inside a secret she could never confirm or deny. The house survives. The marriage becomes legend. But Almina, the woman who paid for all of it, disappears into footnotes. The bargain saved Highclere, but it could not save her. And in the end, she is left with the same question she started with. If a fortune can buy a title and a house and a place in history, why does it feel like loss? Inheritance is a second marriage. The next generation inherits rooms, debt, and a story that sells better than the truth ever did. The The 6th Earl of Carnarvon inherits Highclere in 1923. His name is Henry George Alfred Marius Victor Francis Herbert, which is the kind of name you get when your family has been naming children for centuries and cannot bear to let any ancestor be forgotten. He is 23 years old. He was at his father's bedside in Cairo when the curse allegedly struck. Now he owns the castle, the estate, the title, and the mythology. He does not inherit the money. That is gone. Running Highclere in the 20th century is an exercise in creative desperation. The estate still requires staff, groundskeepers, housekeepers, cooks, gardeners, maintenance workers. The buildings still require heating, which means coal deliveries and boilers. The roof still leaks. The stone still cracks. The costs are relentless. But the income from agricultural rents continues to decline. Farming becomes mechanized and consolidated. Tenants leave. Land values shift. The economic model that sustained estates like Highclere for generations no longer functions. The numbers are brutal. By the mid-20th century, maintaining Highclere cost tens of thousands of pounds per year in modern equivalent. Heating alone can run into the thousands during winter months. Staff salaries, even at modest wages, accumulate quickly when you need a dozen people just to keep the house operational. Insurance, repairs, taxes, all of it stacks up. The 6th Earl tries everything. He opens the house to tourists. He rents out rooms for events. He sells land. He auctions furniture and art. The estate survives, but only by cannibalizing itself. The Tutankhamun connection becomes valuable in a way Carnarvon never anticipated. The curse story keeps the estate famous. People visit Highclere because they want to see where the cursed Earl lived. They want to stand in the rooms where he planned the expedition. They want to feel the weight of history and legend. The estate begins to market the mythology. Tours emphasize the Egyptian artifacts Carnarvon brought back. Display cases hold treasures from the tomb. The narrative shifts from aristocratic heritage to archaeological adventure. Highclere is no longer just a castle. It is the house that touched the pharaoh. But the fame does not pay the bills. Tourism helps, but it is not enough. The estate continues to struggle. Each generation inherits not just property, but debt. The 7th Earl, born in 1924, eventually takes over and faces the same impossible math. How do you maintain a building designed for a world that no longer exists? How do you justify the cost when the cultural value is nostalgia and the economic value is negligible? The answer, for most estates, is you do not. You sell. You donate to the National Trust. You convert to a hotel. You admit defeat. Highclere does not admit defeat. It adapts. The family learns to live in smaller portions of the house. They close off wings that cannot be heated. They reduce staff to a skeleton crew. They become experts at deferred maintenance, at temporary fixes, at the art of making a crumbling estate look presentable for just long enough to get through the next tour season. The survival is impressive, but it is also exhausting. Every generation inherits the same burden. Keep the house standing. Keep the name alive. Pretend the struggle is noble and not just stubborn. The 8th Earl inherits in 2001. By then, Highclere is famous for something new. A television show is being filmed on the grounds. The estate is about to become Downton Abbey, and the mythology is about to shift again. The curse will share space with a fictional family, and the real history will become harder to separate from the drama people watch on Sunday nights. But that is the inheritance now. Not just rooms and debt, but the obligation to be whatever story the world wants to believe about aristocracy, romance, and the past that never quite existed the way we remember it. Downton made the myth marketable. A television camera turns Highclere into a dream again, and the past becomes a brand with a ticket price. Downton Abbey premieres in 2010. The show is a period drama about an aristocratic family navigating the decline of the British estate system in the early 20th century. It is filmed at Highclere. The castle becomes the Crawley family seat. The library, the dining room, the bedrooms, all of it appears on screen, transformed into a fictional world where class and duty and romance unfold in lavish costumes and perfect lighting. The show is a global phenomenon. Millions of people watch. They fall in love with the house. They want to visit. Highclere's fortunes change overnight. Tourism explodes. Visitors arrive from around the world, not to see the castle where the cursed Earl lived, but to see the house where the Crawleys dined. The estate can charge admission. They sell tickets online. They offer special tours. They open a gift shop. Downton Abbey merchandise flies off the shelves. The show turns Highclere into a brand, and the brand is profitable in a way the estate has not been profitable in decades. But the transformation comes with a cost. The real history gets buried under the fiction. Visitors arrive expecting to see Downton, not Carnarvon. They ask about Lady Mary and Matthew Crawley, not Almina and the 5th Earl. The guides have to navigate between what people want to hear and what actually happened. The curse story still gets told, but it competes with plot points from the show. The estate's actual history, the financial desperation, the wartime hospital, the secret marriage settlement, all of it becomes secondary to the televised fantasy. The current Countess of Carnarvon, Lady Fiona, writes books about Highclere's history. She tries to reclaim the real stories. She publishes biographies of Almina. She documents the hospital work. She explains the Egyptian expeditions. The books are well-researched and genuinely informative, but they also market the romance. They emphasize the love story. They soften the transaction. They describe Almina as a passionate nurse and devoted wife, which she was, but they downplay the arithmetic that made the marriage possible in the first place. The money is mentioned, but gently. The scandal is acknowledged, but carefully. The narrative is curated to be inspirational, not uncomfortable. This is what survival requires now. And Highclere cannot afford to alienate visitors by confronting them with the transactional reality of aristocratic marriages or the colonial violence embedded in Egyptian archaeology. It has to be beautiful. It has to be romantic. It has to make people feel good about spending money to walk through rooms that only exist because other people spent money to keep them from collapsing. The estate becomes a performance of history, carefully staged to maximize appeal and minimize complication. Almina's story gets rewritten in this process. She becomes the plucky heiress who saved a great house through love and hard work. The secret father becomes a generous benefactor. The marriage settlement becomes a fairy tale. The wartime hospital becomes proof of her noble character. The financial ruin that followed Carnarvon's death becomes a tragic footnote. What gets erased is the calculation, the silence, the years she spent being useful while never being seen as fully legitimate. The loneliness of a woman who bought her way into a world that would never quite accept her. The television camera does what the marriage settlement could not. It makes Highclere untouchable. As long as the show remains popular, as long as tourists keep arriving, the estate can survive. The bills get paid, the roof gets fixed, the staff get hired, the house stands. But the cost is memory. The real Almina disappears. The complicated woman becomes a costume. The transaction becomes a romance. And the question that haunted her, the question of what wealth can buy and what it destroys, gets buried under gift shop merchandise and guided tours narrated by people who have to smile and say that yes, the dining room really does look just like it did on television. What did the money really save? Highclere still stands, but the question is whether survival counts as happiness or simply a longer kind of loss. The castle is beautiful. That fact is undeniable. The stone glows in evening light. The gardens bloom in careful rows. The towers rise against the Hampshire sky like a promise kept. Visitors walk through rooms that have been maintained, restored, protected across generations. They admire the craftsmanship. They photograph the ceilings. They imagine what it must have been like to live in such grandeur. Highclere survives. It endures. It remains one of the most famous estates in England. But survival is not the same as success. The house stands because people kept sacrificing to keep it standing. Almina gave her fortune. Carnarvon gave his health. Subsequent generations gave their privacy, their autonomy, their ability to live anywhere else or be anything else. The estate became an obligation so consuming that it shaped every decision, every marriage, every financial choice. It is not a home. It is a responsibility that happens to have bedrooms. The question Almina could never answer is the question that still haunts Highclere. What did the money really save? It saved the building. It preserved the title. It allowed the family to maintain status and relevance across a century of economic change that destroyed most estates like it. But it did not save Almina. It did not save Carnarvon. It did not give them happiness or intimacy or the freedom to be anything other than the roles they purchased and performed. The money bought time. It delayed ruin. But it did not prevent loss. It just made the loss more expensive. The irony is that the things that make Highclere famous now, the curse and Downton Abbey, are the things that obscure what actually happened there. The curse turns Carnarvon into a cautionary tale about greed and hubris, which is simpler than admitting he was a man desperate to be remembered for something other than debt. Downton turns the estate into a fantasy of benevolent aristocracy, which is easier than confronting the transactional reality of how great houses actually survived. Both narratives are profitable. Neither is true. Almina's legacy is the most complicated. She saved Highclere. That is inarguable. Without her money, the estate would have been sold or lost decades before Carnarvon ever went to Egypt. But she also disappeared into the saving. Her name is attached to the story, but her actual life, the choices she made, and the cost she paid gets flattened into a supporting role. She is the heiress. She is the nurse. She is the widow. She is never fully the protagonist of her own story. The house is the protagonist. The money is the protagonist. She is just the mechanism. The bargain she made is the bargain every generation since has had to remake. Give up something essential, privacy or autonomy or financial security, to keep the castle standing. Accept that the house matters more than the people inside it. Perform the role convincingly enough that outsiders believe the fiction. And never, ever admit that the whole enterprise might be a monument to stubbornness rather than love. Highclere endures. The tourists come. The gift shop sells. The tours run on schedule. The estate remains solvent, at least for now. But the survival is fragile. It depends on continued interest, continued fame, continued willingness from visitors to pay money to see a house that only exists because other people paid money to save it. The cycle is relentless. And the cost, measured in generations of people who could not live their own lives because they were too busy preserving someone else's architecture, is staggering. The final question is not whether the money saved Highclere. It did. The question is whether saving Highclere was worth what it cost. Whether a building, no matter how beautiful, is worth a lifetime of pretending. Whether immortality through architecture is consolation for a marriage built on contracts and a fortune spent on obsession. Whether Almina, standing in the rooms she rescued, ever felt like she belonged there, or just like she was the price someone paid to keep the walls from falling down. The castle gives no answer. It stands, it endures, it survives. And survival, in the end, is all it was ever designed to do.